Hi, welcome to the bathtub. It's the old masturbator, Scott Bradfield, calling grandma, calling the kids. It's all post tech. It's not a lot of glimmering lights, a lot of special effects or anything like that. It's just me and the bird, and sometimes Lucky when she pops by. Pure mountain water. Cruel light of day. Cruel light of day. I don't get any better looking than this. And this episode is brought to you by On the Planet of the Bold Women. They aren't demure women. They're not shy at all. They're bold women. And, of course, the home game edition of Reading Great Books in the Bathtub, one of my several books I've been either publishing or republishing on my lonesome just to keep me out of trouble. Here's a series of a lot of biographies. I'm going to give you quite a few of them that I really loved that I'm trying to some of them I haven't finished reading. One of them is this one. Carrie McWilliams. I was with a friend the other day, and I couldn't remember Carrie McWilliams' name to save my life. I read 100 pages of his biography of Ambrose Beers. It is great. It's not in print. I had to pick up an old hardcover copy on eBay. What a terrific writer this guy was. I loved his book about Southern California, and he has real affection for Ambrose Beers. And I'm not that fascinated by Ambrose Beers' work, but his life is just amazing. And I'm 100 pages into it, but it's on my list of books to read. The other one, and we got to look these up. I only had this an e-copy. Okay. And some of these I have placeholders for these, which is, you know how well we plan these things. Where is the damn book? Can't remember his name. Anyway, the Richard Brownian biography by, oh my gosh, how come I can't? Oh, Jubilee Hitchhiker. Jubilee Hitchhiker, written by, again, my name has just completely lost me for a minute. We've been talking about Jubilee Hitchhiker for quite a while now on the show because William Hjortsberg, God, how can I not forget Hjortsberg's name? William Hjortsberg's big fat biography of Richard Brownian, who wrote In Watermelon Sugar, The Deeds Were Done and Done Again, As My Life Is Done in Watermelon Sugar. We've been reading those through that book as we reread or read for the first time Brownian's a really gentle, beautiful, kind of affectionate, and as a person, I guess he was a pretty unhappy, screwed up guy, but he comes off as a wonderful human being when you read his books. And I think Hjortsberg has done a great job. Lots of photos, lots of stuff of the history and the background of Brownian. If you like Brownian, I really recommend William Hjortsberg's biography, Jubilee Hitchhiker. This is another placeholder. As I said in the last episode, I've been buying Kindle versions of these big fat biographies. And I have not read this kind of picture biography of H.P. Lovecraft. But one of the books that was on one of my top 10 lists, I made several top 10 literary biography lists, and S.T. Joshi's huge 2-volume biography of Lovecraft is great fun, great reading, really enjoyable. Long kind of extrapolations and analyses of the actual work, which actually wasn't a lot of work from Lovecraft. But Lovecraft was a very complicated, kind of sweet and horrible and unpleasant and loving man. And he was a very complex person. And every time I talk to somebody a lot of young kids like to read about Lovecraft on YouTube or something, because they like to talk about how he was a racist and everything like that. And, I guess he was a racist most of his life, but he was a very complicated guy, an unhappy man, and there's a lot more. There's a lot of stuff going on in that guy's life besides that, and Joshi does a terrific job. You can get it on Kindle. I think I got it for like $6 or $7. It was it's like a 1,000-page biography, and I really recommend it. And that's a perfect book to get on Kindle, or if you have an Adobe reader of some sort, getting an Adobe PDF version. I really enjoyed Jackson Benson's biography of Steinbeck. I read this many years ago just because I love Steinbeck. It's a big, fat book. And again, the humanity and the complexity of the guy who could be unpleasant, but who's generally basically a decent man. And I think he did a terrific job with this. I've read a few other biographies of Steinbeck that don't even come close to being this good. And it's still one of the biggest books I don't know if you can get that on Kindle or not. I wish you could. Here's a bunch of stuff. Here's a bunch of stack of biographies. Here, look at this. Stacks of biographies. I love John Berryman. We haven't done much on John Berryman, but I think I've read 3 biographies of John Berryman, mainly because he was just, not because of the sadness of his life, because he was a terrible alcoholic, but because he could get up every day despite the sadness and produce that incredibly strange, weird, and delightful poetry. This is the Haffenden biography. I read this 30, 40 years ago, and it still has a fond space in my memory. And I like the Paul Mariani did a nice biography called Dream Song, which I read maybe 10 years ago, 8 or 10 years ago. In fact, Paul Mariani also wrote a biography of Wallace Stevens I enjoyed. And I can't remember, something, The Whole Harmonium or something. Anyway, I have that somewhere, but I couldn't get it off the shelf. In fact, if you look way up in that corner, up above Vito Corleone, my Ian Hamilton biography of Robert Lowell is up there. I read that 30 or 40 years ago, and it still has a fond place in my memory. And I can't get rid of it. I can't until I find a Kindle version I can transpose my notes into. Here's a book I just bought on. So this is a biography of Charles Bukowski. I think there's probably several biographies of Charles Bukowski now. This one is by Howard Soons. And the reason I remember this is, besides it was a really good biography with illustrations by the weird and wonderful Bukowski, lots of photos. The photos are all precious too. I just remember I was given this to review in London in the 90s, late 90s. And I was not a big Charles Bukowski fan when I lived in L.A. I never really read him. I always thought he was kind of full of bullshit. I thought it was kind of this phony kind of nonsense, punkish, like talking about how drunk he was and throwing up all the time. And I just thought it was kind of boorish stuff. And I was given this to review, and I read a couple of his books. In fact, I read Ham on Rye with this. It was being released in London about his very difficult childhood. And I really liked it. I liked him. I liked the book, and I've been a Charles Bukowski fan since then. I mean, he's not one of my heroes or anything like people think of him as this great hero. But I think as a man who had a pretty tough life, I loved this book, and I enjoyed it. I just found this today because I was trying to clear books off the shelves. The second part of this, the subtitle of this talk should be trying to clear off my bookshelves. I found this for $2.99 on Kindle, so I bought it. Transposed my notes because I had lots of notes in here. I wanted, so I don't have to read the book again someday. I can get some notes if I really need them quickly, and then I can also reread it again because it is a book I would like to reread. Here's one I have sort of mixed feelings about, but it's quite an extraordinary book in a way. Savage Art, a biography of Jim Thompson by Robert Pulido. I wrote an essay about this book many years ago when it came out, and I want to say it came out in the 90s, early 90s. It's a dense, well-researched. The guy really did a good job of finding out about this very kind of complicated man, very strange man who wrote all these, who was famous for writing those paperback thrillers, really kind of bad taste paperback, kind of crudely published and roughly hewn novels by Jim Thompson, whose stuff is pretty unforgettable and a lot of fun when you read him. And I enjoyed this biography a lot. My only criticism of it is he kind of took Jim Thompson almost too seriously. He kept comparing him to people like, I don't know. There's one place where he compares him to Nabokov. I'm not saying one's better than the other, but there are almost no similarities in the way they write or the way they produced books. Anyway, it was a very intelligent piece of research. And I think almost the first third of the book is about Jim Thompson's childhood and his very strange father, who's clearly an influence on a lot of the books. We have a few more left in here. Oh my gosh, look at this. Yeah, I think these are the last two I'm going to do. I can't find it. I better double check this here. I'm going to check all this stuff because you know us, we do everything here half-assed, or we don't do it at all. That's our motto here at the Bathtub. I believe it was Mike Ashley wrote a biography, which I have on Kindle. Yes, it's called An Extraordinary Life, Algernon Blackwood, An Extraordinary Life by Mike Ashley. I just used this as a place filler so we can say it. As I've mentioned over the years here at the bathtub, I've become a kind of late life enjoyer of horror fiction and classic horror fiction, which I never really liked. I never thought I would like H.P. Lovecraft. And I started reading some of the writers who influenced Lovecraft, particularly Arthur Machen and Algernon Blackwood. This is a very good collection by our buddy S.T. Joshi, whose work we like a lot. And Mike Ashley, I read the first half of it. I haven't finished it, but I want to get back to it. It was one of those labors of love. I love those reviews, those researchers who go out and just do a labor of love on some writer they like a lot. And Mike Ashley did a terrific job from what I got through on that book. We have one last one. All of these books almost made my top 10 list. And frankly, they probably should have made my top 10 list, except I only had 10 spaces. This is another one. I bought this today. It's been on my shelf for years. I reviewed it when it came out 25 years ago. James Salas's biography, wonderful biography of the great Chester Himes, A Life. Chester Himes, if you don't know him, he wrote the great Coffin Head and Gravedigger Jones. I always get their names wrong. Anyway, there's these great detective stories set in Harlem. Really, as Salas makes clear, a hyper-imagined version of Harlem in the 50s. It's violent and filled with imagery. It's like Hieronymus Bosch if he had written a detective novel. Himes had a very difficult, long life before he started publishing these books, which at one point in the biography, one of my favorite things about the biography is it's about a man who was very angry and fed up with the way he was treated as a black writer in America and had spent some time in prison, and who sounded like a very difficult, angry, upsetting, and very loving and hilarious man, a very complicated man. But in the end of his life, he seemed to have found great pleasure in writing these incredibly funny, beautifully written detective novels. The Harlem Cycle, as they're known. But he wrote a lot of other good books as well. Salas does a terrific job of getting in touch with him. I've been wanting to move this off the shelves just because it's big, and I bought that for $2.99 on Kindle today. Changed my notes, moved the notes over into the Kindle notes, and now I have my book. And I can make some space for some more stuff I can go buy. All right, I think that's three episodes about my top 10 list. So it's a top 10 list with this is the kind of, this is the, what do you call it, the follow-up edition. So there's another 10 or 12 books. All of these light literary biographies are bathtubable. You would enjoy them in the bathtub. Stay safe and just read for pleasure. Don't let anybody tell you different.